What if I told you that the most powerful wealth rule ever discovered is deliberately kept out of every school curriculum in Britain? Not because they forgot to include it, not because it's too complicated for students, but because if every ordinary British person learned this one rule, the entire financial system as we know it would collapse overnight. Think about that for a second. You spent 12 years in school, maybe university too. They taught you Shakespeare. They taught you the Pythagorean theorem. They taught you the dates of World War II. But they never, not once, taught you how money actually works. Why? Because there are people who depend on you not knowing. Right now, at this very moment, millions of British workers are waking up, going to jobs they barely tolerate, handing over a chunk of their salary to the government, paying their rent or mortgage, and wondering why, no matter how hard they work, they never seem to get ahead. And the answer is sitting right in front of them, hidden in plain sight. Today, I'm going to show you 3 things that will permanently change how you see money. First, the one wealth rule that every billionaire family in Britain quietly teaches their children, but would never want you to know. Second, the deliberate system built specifically to keep ordinary people financially trapped forever. And third, the simple shift that can completely change your financial future, starting today with whatever money you currently have. This isn't theory. This isn't motivation. This is the raw, uncomfortable truth about wealth in modern Britain. Let me show you exactly how this happened. To understand this properly, we need to go back to 1870. That's the year Britain introduced compulsory education for the first time. The Education Act of 1870 made school mandatory for children across England and Wales. Now, on the surface, this sounds wonderful. Education for everyone, equal opportunity, a better future for ordinary British families. But here's what the history books don't tell you. The people who designed that education system were not ordinary workers. They were wealthy industrialists, factory owners, landowners, the elite class of Victorian Britain. And they had a very specific purpose in mind. They needed workers, skilled, obedient, punctual workers who could read instructions, do basic arithmetic, and show up on time every single day. They did not need financial thinkers. They did not need people who understood how capital works. They did not need a population that understood the difference between working for money and making money work for them. So they built a school system that produced exactly what they needed. And 150 years later, almost nothing has changed. Think about the British school curriculum right now. Students learn algebra they'll never use. They memorize historical dates. They analyze poetry. They study the life cycle of plants. But ask a typical 18-year-old British student these basic questions. How does compound interest work? What is the difference between an asset and a liability? How do taxes actually reduce your real income? What is inflation really doing to your savings right now? Most cannot answer a single one. And this isn't accidental. A 2023 study found that less than 15% of British secondary schools include any meaningful financial education in their curriculum. And in the rare cases where they do, it barely scratches the surface. Meanwhile, the children of Britain's wealthiest families are learning something completely different. They're learning the rule. The one rule that separates people who build generational wealth from people who work their entire lives and retire with almost nothing. And here's the really uncomfortable part. This rule isn't complicated. It isn't reserved for geniuses. It doesn't require a trust fund or a wealthy family background. It's so simple that once you hear it, you'll be angry that nobody ever told you sooner. Now here's where things get really interesting. The rule has a name. It's called the velocity of money. And before you switch off thinking this sounds like complicated economics, stay with me, because I'm going to explain this in the simplest way possible. Here's the core idea. Wealthy people never let their money sit still. Read that again. Wealthy people never let their money sit still. Right now, millions of British people are doing what they were told was responsible. They're saving money. They're putting it in their bank account. They're watching the balance slowly grow and feeling proud of themselves. But here's what's actually happening to that money. The Bank of England's current base rate means your high street savings account is paying you somewhere between 3% and 4.5% interest, at best. Sounds okay, right? But inflation in Britain has been running hot for years. Even as it comes down, the real cost of living continues to rise. Your food, energy bills, rent, transport, everything costs more every single year. So while your savings account shows a growing number, your actual purchasing power is quietly shrinking. Your money is sitting still, and sitting still means falling behind. Now let's look at what wealthy British families do differently. Take a family in Surrey, old money, the kind of family that's been wealthy for 3 or 4 generations. They don't keep their money in a savings account. They understand something fundamental. Money is a tool, and tools are meant to be used. Their money is constantly moving. It buys property that generates rental income. That rental income buys shares in businesses. Those shares pay dividends. Those dividends buy more property. Round and round it goes. The money never sits still. It's always working, always generating more money. This is the velocity of money in action. And here's where the numbers become truly shocking. Let's say 2 people both start with £10,000 at age 25. Person A does what school taught them, works hard, saves carefully, keeps money in an ISA earning 4% annually. By age 65, that £10,000 becomes roughly £48,000. Not bad. Sounds responsible. But person B learned the velocity rule. They used that $10,000 as a deposit lever. They learned how to make money move. They reinvested every return. They understood compound growth across multiple streams. By age 65, that same $10,000 could conservatively be worth $400,000 to $600,000. Same starting amount, same 40 years, completely different outcomes. The only difference was knowledge. Knowledge that person A was never given. Knowledge that was sitting right there, but was never taught in any British classroom. Now you might be thinking, okay, but property requires more than $10,000. Starting a business is risky. Not everyone can do this. And you're partially right. But that thinking, that exact hesitation, is itself a product of the financial programming you received from a school system designed to produce workers, not wealth builders. Because the velocity rule doesn't require property. It doesn't require a business. It doesn't even require much money to start. It requires a fundamental shift in how you think about every single pound you earn. The question wealthy people ask is never, how do I save this money safely? The question they ask is, how do I make this money produce more money before I spend it? That one question changes everything. A wealthy person who receives their salary doesn't think, what bills do I need to pay? They think, before this money leaves my account, what can it do for me? Even if it's sitting in a high-yield account for 2 weeks before bills are due, it's working. Even if it's briefly invested in something liquid and low risk, it's moving. The habit of making money move rather than letting it sit is the foundation of every significant fortune ever built in Britain. And not a single British school teaches this. But if you think that's shocking, wait until you hear this. The velocity rule is powerful, but on its own, it's only half the picture. Because while ordinary British people were never taught how to make money move, they were very carefully taught something else entirely. They were taught to be perfect consumers. And this is where the financial trap becomes truly diabolical. Let me introduce you to a concept called the consumption cycle. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Here's how it works. You go to school. You're told that getting good grades leads to a good job. A good job means a good salary. And a good salary means you can afford a good life. So you work hard. you get the job. The salary arrives. And then, immediately, the consumption machine activates. You need a car to get to work. You need professional clothes. You need a phone contract. You need a gym membership because work is stressful. You need weekends away because you deserve it after working so hard. And before you know it, your salary is entirely committed before it even arrives. This isn't an accident. Britain's entire consumer economy is built on this cycle, and it is extraordinarily sophisticated. Think about how British advertising works. Every single major brand targets the same emotional triggers. You deserve this. You've worked hard. Treat yourself. Life's too short. You only live once. These aren't random marketing slogans. They are precisely engineered psychological triggers designed to interrupt the moment between receiving money and making a rational decision about it. They want to catch your money before the velocity rule can activate. And the timing is perfect, because school never taught you to pause. School never taught you to ask, does buying this bring me closer to or further from financial freedom? School taught you to work, earn, and spend. Work, earn, spend. Work, earn, spend. That cycle keeps the economy moving. It keeps businesses profitable. It keeps tax revenues flowing to the government. But it keeps you exactly where you are. Now here's where the British class system makes this even more insidious. Research consistently shows that in Britain, visible consumption is deeply tied to social identity, particularly for working and middle-class families. The car on the driveway, the holiday photos on social media, the restaurant meals, the trainers, the kitchen renovation. These aren't just purchases. In British social culture, they are signals. They tell your neighbors, your colleagues, your extended family that you are doing okay, that you are succeeding. And wealthy families, old money families, know this. They actively encourage it. Because every pound that a working class or middle class family spends on visible consumption is a pound that isn't building wealth. It's a pound that flows upward into the businesses, the property portfolios, the investment funds owned by the people who already have everything. The system feeds itself. You spend on a coffee chain, the profit flows to shareholders. The shareholders are predominantly already wealthy. Their wealth compounds. Your money is gone.
You buy a new car on finance. The interest payments flow to a financial institution. The institution's profits reward its investors. The investors are predominantly already wealthy. Your debt compounds. Their wealth compounds. You pay rent every month. The rent flows to a landlord. The landlord's property value increases. Their wealth compounds. You build zero equity. Every transaction in the consumption cycle transfers small amounts of money from the many to the few. Billions of tiny transfers every single day. And the beautiful, terrible genius of it is that everyone participates voluntarily. Because nobody taught you the alternative. Nobody sat you down at age 15 and said, every pound you earn is either building your future or building someone else's. Which do you want it to do? Instead, they taught you algebra. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. Everything we've covered so far, the velocity rule, the consumption cycle, the debt trap, these are pieces of a much bigger picture. And the biggest revelation isn't about money at all. It's about time. Specifically, it's about a rule so powerful, so mathematically certain, that Albert Einstein allegedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. Compound interest. Now, before you think you've heard this before, stay with me, because what I'm about to show you goes far beyond the basic definition. This is about how compound interest intersects with the British class system in a way that virtually guarantees the gap between rich and poor will keep growing forever, unless you understand what's really happening. Most British people have a vague understanding of compound interest. Interest on interest.
Your money grows faster over time. Fine. But here's what nobody shows you. The actual numbers applied to real British life right now. Let's take two British men, both born in the same year, both starting their working lives at 22.
Man 1, we'll call him James, comes from a middle-class family in Manchester. His parents worked hard, but never had much left over. They didn't teach him about money because they didn't know themselves. James gets a decent job, earning £32,000 a year. He's responsible. He saves $200 a month from age 22. Man 2, we'll call him Edward, comes from an established wealthy family in the home counties. His grandfather built a successful business. His parents invested wisely. From birth, Edward has a trust fund of £50,000 quietly sitting in a diversified investment portfolio, growing at an average of 7% annually. Now, watch what happens. James saves diligently for 43 years until retirement at 65. His $200 a month invested at a modest 5% return grows to approximately $340,000. That's genuinely impressive. James worked hard and was responsible. But Edward never worked a single day. He never saved a penny of his own money. He simply had $50,000 sitting and growing from birth. By age 65, that $50,000 at 7% compound annual growth has become approximately £1,050,000. £1 million from doing absolutely nothing. James worked 43 years, saved consistently, built £340,000. Edward did nothing, inherited a head start, built £1 million. The gap isn't just unfair, it's mathematically inevitable, given how compound interest works. This is why wealthy British families protect generational wealth so fiercely. They understand what ordinary families don't, that the earlier compound interest begins working, the more unstoppable it becomes. Every year that a wealthy family maintains their capital is another year that the mathematical gap widens. Not because the wealthy work harder, not because they're smarter, simply because compound interest rewards time above everything else.
The British tax structure is specifically designed to protect this dynamic. Capital gains tax in Britain is lower than income tax, meaning money that grows from investment is taxed less than money earned from working. Inheritance tax has significant thresholds and exemptions that sophisticated wealthy families navigate with ease using legal structures that ordinary families never know exist. Pension contribution rules favor higher earners. The more you earn, the more tax relief you receive on pension contributions. ISA allowances are the same for everyone in theory, but $20,000 a year is a meaningful amount for a wealthy family to shelter. For a family earning $28,000 a year, finding $20,000 to invest is simply impossible. Every single one of these structural features was designed, maintained, and protected by legislators who are themselves predominantly wealthy, who themselves benefit from these exact rules, who themselves want compound interest to keep working undisturbed. And every single one of these structural features was never explained to you in school. So what does all this mean for us today? Let's bring this down from the big picture and make it personal, because understanding a system is useless unless you know what to do about it. Here's the reality for ordinary British people in 2026. The average UK salary is approximately $35,000 before tax. After income tax, national insurance, and pension contributions, take-home pay is roughly $27,000 a year. That's about $2,250 a month. Average UK rent outside London is now around $1,100 to $1,300 a month. In London, it's dramatically higher. Add council tax, energy bills, food, transport, and basic living costs, and the average British worker has somewhere between $200 and $500 left at the end of each month. That's it. That's the window. That gap between income and essential expenses is where your entire financial future lives. And here's what the wealthy know about that window that ordinary people don't. Even $200 a month applied with the right knowledge and the right strategy can transform a financial future over time. But only if you understand 3 things that school never taught you.
First thing, the order of money matters enormously. Most British people operate on what financial educators call spend first, save what's left. They pay their bills, they live their lives, and if anything survives to the end of the month, they save it. Wealthy families invert this completely. They operate on invest first, live on what's left. Before any discretionary spending happens, a portion of income is already moving, already working, already compounding. Even if that portion is small at first, even if it's just £50 a month when you're starting out. The habit of prioritizing the velocity of money over immediate consumption changes your relationship with money at a fundamental level. And critically, it means compound interest starts working for you immediately, right now, today. Not in some imagined future when you have more money. Because here's the dangerous lie that keeps ordinary people trapped. I'll start investing when I have more money. More money rarely comes. Life expands to fill income. Expenses grow with salary. The person earning $25,000 who thinks they'll invest when they earn $35,000 often finds that at $35,000, they're just as financially stretched as before. The habit must come before the money, not after it.
Second thing, asset accumulation must replace consumption as the primary goal. This is perhaps the hardest mental shift because it runs directly against everything British consumer culture tells you. But here is the simple test that every wealthy family applies to every significant purchase. Does this purchase generate income or does it drain income? A car, in most cases, drains income. Insurance, fuel, maintenance, depreciation. It costs money continuously. Property, if structured correctly, generates income. Rent comes in every month. The asset itself may appreciate over time. Shares in dividend-paying companies generate income. Money arrives in your account regularly, simply for owning them. A luxury holiday drains income. It costs money and then it's gone. Skills and education, if they increase your earning power, generate income. They pay returns for years. This doesn't mean never spend on anything enjoyable. Life requires balance. But the wealthy always ensure that their asset column is growing faster than their liability column. Always. And every major financial decision gets run through that simple filter. Will this generate income or drain income? That question alone, applied consistently, changes everything.
Third thing, understanding the British tax system is not optional. Britain's tax system is complex by design. But within that complexity, there are legal, legitimate tools that ordinary people have access to, but rarely use fully. ISAs allow up to £20,000 a year to grow completely tax-free. Many British people don't maximize this. Lifetime ISAs give a 25% government bonus on savings for first-time buyers or retirement. Thousands of young British people are unaware they exist. Pension contributions receive tax relief at your marginal rate. A basic rate taxpayer effectively gets a 25% instant return on pension contributions. This is free money that millions of British workers leave unclaimed. Self-employment and side income have legitimate expense deductions that employed workers never think about accessing. None of this is secret. None of it is illegal. All of it is available to ordinary British people. But you had to find it yourself, because school never showed you where to look. Before we wrap up, there's one final thing you need to know.
Everything I've shown you today, the velocity rule, the consumption trap, the mathematics of compound interest, the structural advantages of wealth, points to one uncomfortable conclusion. The financial gap in Britain is not primarily caused by lack of opportunity. It is primarily caused by lack of knowledge. And that knowledge gap is not accidental. But here's the final revelation, the one that should genuinely change how you feel about your situation. The same system that withheld this knowledge from you cannot stop you from acquiring it now. The internet changed everything. The wealth rules that took generations of elite British families centuries to accumulate and protect are now available to anyone with a smartphone and the willingness to learn. The compound interest calculator that shows you exactly how your money will grow is free online. The investment platforms that once required a stockbroker and a minimum of tens of thousands of pounds now allow you to start with £1. The tax optimization strategies that wealthy families paid accountants thousands to implement are now explained in detail in books, podcasts, and videos that cost nothing to access. The knowledge barrier has collapsed. What remains is the habit barrier and the mindset barrier, and those are entirely within your control. Let me leave you with this. There's a family in Birmingham right now. Ordinary background. Parents worked in manufacturing. No inheritance, no trust fund, no wealthy connections. But 10 years ago, one member of that family stumbled across the velocity rule. Started small, £100 a month invested consistently. Learned the tax tools, shifted from consumer thinking to asset thinking. Applied these principles imperfectly but persistently. 10 years later, that family has a property generating rental income, a growing investment portfolio, an emergency fund, zero consumer debt.
They didn't get lucky. They didn't win anything. They simply learned what should have been taught to them at school and applied it consistently over time. That family exists in every city in Britain, quietly building what the system never wanted them to build. And you can be part of that story. The government won't teach you this rule. The banks won't remind you of it. The advertising industry is actively working against it. But now you know it.
The velocity of money. The consumption trap. The mathematics of compound interest. The legal tools hiding in plain sight. The question now is simple. What will you do with this knowledge? Because the gap between where you are and where you want to be financially isn't filled with luck or inheritance or opportunity. It's filled with exactly the knowledge you just received today. And unlike the 12 years you spent in a classroom that never taught you any of this, you can start applying this tomorrow.